Thank you. And good afternoon.
Well, thank you. And good afternoon.
You know, folks in Washington like to invoke
President Reagan's name often when they criticize President Trump.
They say or at least insinuate that Donald Trump
is nothing like
They say the current president's approach is nothing like the vision
championed by Ronald Reagan at the height of the Cold War. As we grappled with the Soviets and ultimately prevailed.
Are wrong. They're dead wrong.
But those folks are wrong.
Most who invoke Ronald Reagan's name today, self-styled Republican hawks,
especially self-styled Republican hawks,
Ronald Reagan,
are not much like
the policies they championed are nothing like his.
The policies they championed are nothing like his. In fact, for the better part of 30 years, they've been quite the opposite.
If you look at actual policies, Donald Trump is the
true and rightful heir of Ronald Reagan.
It's President Trump who has inherited and restored
President Reagan's powerful but focused and realistic approach to national defense.
That we gather at the Reagan
It's therefore only fitting that we gather at the Reagan Presidential Library today to talk about President Trump's America First, Peace Through Strength,
what it means
common sense agenda
of war,
and what it means at the Department of War.
One need only look at the results to understand why
President Trump is that.
So let's look at what Reagan and his administration. Reagan rebuilt the military after Vietnam.
And that is rightfully considered one of his greatest achievements. President Trump has done and is doing the same, making historic investments in
But President Reagan
defense.
also believed sincerely
in the peace part
as his
Peace Through Strength.
It was not a popular thing to do at the time, at the height of the Cold War.
It was not a popular thing to do at the time, at the height of the Cold War, to talk to communists.
During his high-profile meetings with Mikhail Gorbachev and others, Ronald Reagan saw the prudence
and potential in engaging with our nation's adversaries from a position of strength.
Even in the face of fierce criticism at home,
including from his own
President Reagan wasn't
party.
naive. He recognized
that fruitful engagements with our adversaries were only possible from
military strength.
Which is why he focused
so much on building up
the American military. We still talk about the Reagan buildup. And my kids and yours will someday talk about the Trump
President Reagan and his team inherited a military
worn down from their generation's endless war in Vietnam. And they took the lessons of that war to heart. This is why he was so deliberate in how he used
the most famous military doctrine of the Reagan
administration, named for his Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, was specifically designed to correct for the failures that led
Among
to
other
Vietnam.
key principles, the Weinberger Doctrine
stipulated.
The United States should not commit forces to combat unless
the vital national interests of the United States or its allies are involved.
U.S. troops should only be committed wholeheartedly and with the clear intention of winning.
Otherwise, troops should not be
committed. U.S. combat troops should be committed only with clearly defined
political and military objectives and with the capacity to accomplish.
And fourth, the commitment of U.S. troops should be considered only as a last resort. And it was reflected in how President Reagan actually used
the American military, namely in a focused, decisive manner, and only when he determined that it was in our nation's vital interest to do so.
President Reagan only committed
In fact, throughout his time in office, President Reagan only committed U.S. ground forces twice.
Otherwise, he focused the
in Grenada and in Lebanon. Otherwise, he focused the joint force on the Cold War era threat and priority theater.
That's how President Reagan achieved peace through strength.
Always with a clear eye toward lasting peace.
Suffice it to say, Ronald Reagan
Suffice it to say, Ronald Reagan's disciplined, focused, and realistic approach was a far cry from the grandiose, nation-building, moralistic, and rudderless wars that many of his self-described acolytes led us into in the decades after Reagan left office.
My generation fought it.
Wars.
Indeed, it's only under President Trump's leadership.
It's only under President Trump's leadership
we've been able to restore
during his first term and now that we've been able to restore America's greatness after years of suffering under the so-called bipartisan euphemism
for disastrous,
which is really just a euphemism for disastrous foreign policy. Out with utopian idealism, in with hard nose.
To be specific, Ronald Reagan taught us the value of focused, powerful leadership.
But his so-called disciples
Since the end of the Cold War, a generation of self-proclaimed
neo-Reaganites have touted Reagan's name,
all the bluster,
but didn't govern like him. All the bluster, none of the clarity.
In the military realm.
That's especially true.
This generation of self-proclaimed neo-Reaganites
abandoned Reagan's actual wise policy
neoconservatism
in favor of unchecked neoconservatism
and economics
globalism.
Dismantled our industrial.
In economics, they dismantled our industrial, shipping it overseas. At the same time, in diplomacy and defense, they swore off the clear-eyed and flexible realism of Reagan, Nixon,
Instead, they set about trying to make America the policeman, the protector, the arbiter
of the whole world.
Democracy
Even for all.
Pesh River Valley.
They say. Even in the Pesh River Valley.
Can't do it.
Even when people don't want it.
They turned American allies into dependents.
They turned American allies into
dependents. Nations across Europe and around the
all
world.
but encouraging these nations across Europe and around the world to free ride while we subsidize their defense with U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Described neo-Reaganites sought global military
military
under the auspices of
hegemony. Under the auspices of
we got rudderless wars in the Middle East, land war in Europe,
we got rudderless wars in the Middle East, land war in Europe, and the economic rise.
After presiding over such a poor performance, these people still think
it's remarkable
to speak in public.
That these people still think they're qualified to speak in public.
Moralize to the rest of us.
Let alone
some of them
moralize to
have
the rest
even been
of us.
awarded for it.
Some of them have even been awarded for it on this very
But President Trump knows better. He knows what it means to restore peace through strength.
He knows what it means to restore peace through strength on an enduring basis.
First.
To put our nation's interests first. And the American people first.
Applicable.
In a way that is practical, applicable, and common sense.
America better, but also leaves our allies.
America better, but also leaves our allies.
It's the vision that he ran on and led on in his first term.
It's the vision that he ran on and led on in his first term. And he's building on it now in his second.
It's a vision, not the quasi-imperialist delusions.
It's a vision, not the quasi-imperialist delusions that led us to so many disasters in the recent decades.
To the true
that will actually bring us back
of Ronald Reagan.
To the true legacy
out with utopian idealism in.
Out with utopian idealism in with hard
Just look at the facts.
Realism.
Like President Reagan,
Just look at the facts.
Trump is dedicated to both sides.
Like President Reagan, President Trump is dedicated to both sides.
Not just using that phrase as a thin veil for warmongering.
Not just using that phrase as a thin veil for warmongering. In less than a year, President Trump has secured 8 major peace deals, including a historic end to the war in Gaza.
Even as we speak under the president's leadership, we are
working tirelessly to end the tragic war in Ukraine.
A war that never would have started in the first place if he had been
president. A war that never would have started in the first place if he had been president.
The world sees an entirely different America today.
The world sees an entirely different
These historic opportunities for peace are not happening.
These historic opportunities for peace are not happening.
It's President Trump's vision and determination.
It's President Trump's vision and determination.
President Reagan. President Trump is willing to talk to rivals.
President Trump is willing to talk to rivals.
Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s to Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping
in the 1980s to Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping.
This is born of strength.
This is born of strength.
It is born of clarity,
not weakness.
Purpose.
It is born of clarity,
purpose.
Folks in Washington like to criticize President Trump for doing so, but those critics forget that this is exactly what Ronald Reagan did.
Better off for it.
And America,
Like President Reagan, President Trump also knows how important.
Like President Reagan, President Trump also knows how important it is to negotiate from a position of strength, especially military strength.
Department of War.
And at the newly renamed Department of War,
and to Congress.
Thanks to President Trump's leadership and to Congress,
in funding last year.
We received a historic boost in funding last year and believe that is only just
Make no mistake about it, President Trump is hell-bent.
Make no mistake about it, President Trump is hell-bent on maintaining and accelerating the most powerful military the world has ever seen. The most powerful, the most lethal, and American-made
freedom.
The arsenal.
We're also restoring the warrior ethos back to basics.
We're also restoring the warrior ethos back to basics. Readiness, accountability, standards, discipline, lethality. I'm not sure if you saw, but I recently gave a speech on that topic to a few generals in Quantico.
The War Department is the sword and the shield of peace.
The War Department is the sword and the shield of peace through strength. We are
the strength department. That sword as
and we stand ready to wield that sword as President Trump
The opposite
directs.
Of peace through strength.
The opposite
is war
of peace
through
strength is war
wokeness,
through weakness.
Weakness and war.
Wokeness,
all specialties
weakness, and
of Joe
war.
Biden and Lloyd
all
Austin.
specialties of Joe Biden
the debacle
and Lloyd
in
Austin.
Afghanistan, a stain on our country.
The debacle in
and a sin committed
Afghanistan,
against the
a
troops.
stain on our country and a sin committed against the troops.
Islamist war against
The
Israel
weakness
on
that
October 7th.
unleashed Islamist war against
And
Israel
that
on
same
October
weakness
7th.
invited war in Ukraine.
And that same
And
weakness
Vladimir
invited
Putin
war
saw
in
the
Ukraine.
open door and he took it.
And Vladimir Putin saw the
Spy
open door
balloons
and
flying
he took
over
it.
our country and
Spy
SecDefs
balloons
going
flying
AWOL
over our
for a
country
week.
and SecDefs going
Wokeness,
AWOL for a week.
Weakness,
Wokeness,
war.
weakness.
Now, I was recently tempted
war.
when the discussion
recently
went out
tempted
about
when the discussion
hitting drug boats
went out
to
about
use the phrase
hitting drug boats.
righteous strike.
To use the phrase righteous strike.
Team counsel me against it, said sir.
Then my
That's the
team
phrase that was
counsel me
used
against it, said sir.
by Mark
That's
Milley.
the phrase that was used
when the family
by Mark Milley.
when a family of Afghans was
When the
struck
family,
as a response to what
when a
happened
family
at
of
Abbey Gate,
Afghans
they
was
called it
struck
for 2 straight
as a
days
response to what
righteous
happened at Abbey Gate, they called
strike.
it for 2 straight days of
when they would have
righteous.
known within hours
Right.
exactly what they
When they would have known
struck.
within hours exactly what they
Weakness,
struck.
wokeness, war.
Weakness, wokeness.
It's a new day. With Operation
It's a new
Midnight
day.
Hammer, the world saw after decades.
With Operation
of
Midnight
hemming,
Hammer, the
hawing,
world saw
the
after
decisive
decades
effect
of
of American
hemming,
military
hawing,
strength in
the
obliterating
decisive
Iranian
effect of
nuclear
American military strength in
program.
obliterating
President Trump
the
said
Iranian
they can't have a
nuclear
nuclear bomb.
President Trump
And he
said
meant
they
it.
can't have a
Others
nuclear
have
bomb.
said it. President Trump
And he meant it. Others have said it. President Trump did it.
textbook example.
This was an
of the
operation. This
Weinberger
operation was a
Doctrine in
textbook
action.
example of the
Decisive,
Weinberger Doctrine in
focused,
action.
applied in a focused,
Decisive,
clear-eyed way
focused,
that advanced
applied
our
in a
nation's
focused,
interests
clear-eyed way
while
that
avoiding
advanced our
another
nation's interests
protracted
while
war.
avoiding another
Same goes for our
protracted
limited
war.
but lethal actions against the Houthis.
Same
in
goes
Yemen.
for our limited but lethal
Joe
actions
Biden
against the
tolerated
Houthis
the
in Yemen.
targeting of U.S. shipping.
Joe Biden tolerated the targeting
President
of U.S.
Trump
shipping.
restored freedom of navigation.
President Trump
Another
restored freedom of
foundational
navigation.
and core national interest.
Another
Somewhere,
foundational
Thomas
and
Jefferson
core national interest.
smiling.
Somewhere, Thomas Jefferson.
And
is
right now,
smiling.
the world is seeing the strength of American resolve.
And right now,
stemming
the world
flow
is seeing the
lethal
strength of
drugs
American
to our
resolve
country.
and stemming the flow of lethal
Here
drugs
again, we've
to
been
our country.
focused, and here we've been clear.
Here again, we've been focused, and here we've been clear. If you're working for a designated terrorist organization and you bring drugs to this country in a boat, we will find you
Let
and
there
we
be
will
no
sink
doubt
you.
about it.
Let there be no
President Trump
doubt
can and will
about
take
it.
decisive military action.
President
as he
Trump
sees
can and
fit
will
to
take
defend our
decisive
nation's
military action as he
Let no
sees fit to
country
defend
on
our nation's
earth
interests.
doubt that for
Let no country on earth doubt that.
Like
for a
President
moment.
Reagan, President Trump knows how to do so in a
Like
way
President
that is
Reagan,
tied
President
to a
Trump
clear
knows
purpose
how to
with
do so in a
decisive,
way that is
credible
tied to a
theory
clear
of
purpose
military
with a decisive
Just
and
as
credible
the
theory
lessons
of
of
military
Vietnam
victory.
informed
Just
Ronald
as the
Reagan and
lessons
his
of
Weinberger
Vietnam
Doctrine,
informed Ronald Reagan
so too,
and his Weinberger
the
Doctrine,
lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan
so too
guide
the
President
lessons
Trump
of Iraq and
his
Afghanistan
secretary
guide President
today.
Trump and his secretary.
For years,
today.
a bipartisan consensus of neoconservatives
For years, a
and liberal
bipartisan consensus of neoconservatives and liberal internationalists led us from one
They sent our
disaster to
nation's
another.
sons and daughters to war after
They sent our nation's
rudderless
sons and
war.
daughters to war after
Even as they allowed our
rudderless
allies to
war.
grow weaker.
Even as
and
they
our
allowed our
potential
allies
rivals
to grow weaker.
stronger.
And our potential rivals.
From the very
stronger.
beginning, nearly a decade
From
ago,
the very
President Trump
beginning,
called this
nearly
out
a decade ago,
for what
President
it
Trump
is.
called this out
Stupid.
for what it is.
An America
Stupid.
last foreign policy.
An America last
and they fought him
foreign
for it.
policy.
They tried to jail him for it.
And they fought him for it. They tried to jail him for it.
Well, their time is over.
And they failed.
Their America Last bipartisan consensus is
Their
done.
America
It is
Last
finished.
bipartisan consensus
Under President
is done.
Trump's leadership, after decades of
Under President Trump's leadership, after decades of disastrous decisions by this nation's self-appointed so-called foreign policy
American
elite,
interests
we're once
first.
again putting American interests
prioritizing
first.
our nation's security,
We're
freedom, and
prioritizing
prosperity.
our nation's
citizens.
security, freedom, and prosperity.
As laid
Our
out by
citizens.
President Trump, we're doing it in a way that leaves
As laid
not
out by
only
President
our
Trump,
nation
we're doing it
better
in a way
off,
that leaves not only our
but
nation
also
better
the
off,
world. Out
but
with
also
utopian
the
realism
world.
in
out with utopian realism or out with utopian
in
idealism,
with hard-nosed realism.
with hard-nosed
The president's
realism.
approach is one of that flexible.
The president's
but
approach is
practical
one
realism.
of
Common
that
sense, if you
flexible
will, that
but
looks
practical
at
realism.
the world
Common
with a
sense,
clear-eyed
if you will, that
perspective.
looks at the
Essential
world with a
for serving
clear-eyed
America's
perspective.
real interests.
Essential for
The approach is
serving
informed
America's
by
real
strategic
interests.
Rationality.
The approach is informed by
Cost-benefit
strategic
assessments.
rationality.
We will define our
cost-benefit
vital interests in ways that are
assessments.
reasonable. and
We will
that make
define our
sense to
vital interests in ways that are
ordinary
reasonable and that make sense to
This is the
ordinary
approach
Americans.
and mindset that shapes the
This is the
department's
approach and mindset that shapes
As a result,
the
the War
department's
Department
focus.
will not be distracted by
As a result, the War Department will not be distracted
democracy-building
by
interventionism,
democracy-building
undefined wars, regime change,
interventionism,
climate change,
undefined
woke
wars, regime
moralizing,
change, climate change,
and
woke
feckless nation
moralizing, and
will
feckless
instead
nation building.
Put our nation's
We
practical,
will instead
concrete
put our
interests
nation's practical,
first. We will
concrete
deter war.
interests first.
We will advance our
We will
interests.
deter
We will
war.
defend our
We will
people.
advance our interests. We will
Peace
defend
is
our people.
our goal.
Peace
And in
is
service of that
our
objective,
goal.
we will always be ready to fight
And in
win
service of that
decisively,
objective, we
of
will
course.
always be ready to fight and win decisively.
As part of
if
this
called upon.
mission, we are asking American taxpayers
As part of
to
this
fund
mission,
the
we are
world's
asking
greatest
American
military.
taxpayers to
We're asking
fund the
mothers
world's greatest
and
military.
fathers across America
We're asking
to
mothers
trust
and
us
fathers across
with their
America
most
to
precious
trust
resource,
us
their sons
with
and
their
daughters.
most precious resource,
And
their
we will
sons
honor
and
their
daughters.
trust and their sacrifice.
And we will honor their trust
The
and their
historic
sacrifice.
recruiting and retention numbers of
The
President
historic
Trump's first
recruiting
year
and retention
show
numbers of
who
President Trump's
the
first
American
year
people trust.
show who the American people trust.
This means we will not send America's best to advance foolhardy
This means we
or
will not
reckless
send
adventures
America's
halfway
best
around
to
the
advance
world.
foolhardy or reckless
It
adventures
also means
halfway
not
around the
asking them
world.
to pick up the tab for allies. Who
It also
should fund
means
their
not
own
asking them to
defense.
pick up the tab for allies who should fund their
Instead,
own
and
defense.
above all, it means that we only
Instead,
ask
and
our
above all,
warriors to
it
fight
means
for
that we
things that
only
make
ask our
America
warriors to
and
fight for
America
things that make America
safe, free,
and
and
Americans
prosperous.
safe,
Life,
free, and prosperous.
liberty, and the
Life,
pursuit of happiness. Nothing
liberty,
more.
and the pursuit of
and nothing
happiness.
less.
Nothing more.
Again, this
And
is
nothing
common
less.
sense. And that's
Again,
what President Trump's
this is
War
common
Department
sense.
is all
And that's what
about.
President Trump's War Department
This common
is
sense
all
approach means
about.
prioritizing four
This
key
common
lines
sense
of effort
approach
at the
means
Department of War.
prioritizing four key
First,
lines of
defending
effort
the U.S.
at the Department
Homeland
of War.
and our hemisphere.
First, defending the U.S.
Second,
homeland
deterring
and
China
our
through
hemisphere.
strength,
Second,
not
deterring
confrontation.
China through strength.
Third,
not
increased
confrontation.
burden sharing for U.S. allies
Third,
and partners.
increased burden sharing for
And
U.S.
fourth,
allies and
supercharging
partners.
U.S. defense
And
industrial
fourth,
base.
supercharging the U.S. defense industrial
As we
base.
apply President Trump's approach to flexible,
As we apply President
flexible
Trump's
realism,
approach
the
to
first two lines of
flexible,
effort are the
flexible
primary
realism,
operational
the first
focus
two
of
lines of effort are the
simple
primary
reason that
operational
these
focus
missions
of the
matter
joint
the
force.
most
For the
for
simple
safety,
reason that
freedom,
these
and
missions
prosperity
matter
of
the
America.
most for safety, freedom,
At the same
and
time,
prosperity of
however,
America.
other threats persist around
At the same
world,
time,
including
however,
Europe
other threats
and the Middle
persist
East.
around
We
the world,
cannot
including
ignore
in
them,
Europe
nor should we.
and the Middle East. We
That's
cannot
why our
ignore
approach
them, nor
also
should we.
prioritizes burden sharing.
That's
and
why our
burden
approach
shifting.
also
Indeed,
prioritizes
for the
burden
first time
sharing
since
and burden
Reagan's
shifting.
era, allied
Indeed, for
and
the first
partner
time
burden
since Reagan's
sharing
era,
is no
allied
longer
and partner
an
burden
afterthought or a
sharing
nice to have.
is no longer
Today is
an
a
afterthought or
core
a nice to
element
have.
of our national defense.
Today is a core element
And
of our
finally, the
national
fourth
defense.
line of effort.
And finally, the fourth line of effort.
Supercharging
the
America's
most important.
defense industrial base.
Supercharging America's
Underwrites
defense industrial
everything
base.
else.
Underwrites
Last month I
everything
gave
else.
another speech in Washington, this time
Last
to
month I
defense
gave
industry
another
leaders
speech in Washington,
announce
this
a
time to defense
department-wide,
industry leaders,
not
to announce a
reform,
department-wide
transformation
not
of
reform,
requirements,
a
acquisitions, and
transformation
foreign military
of
sales.
requirements,
Our
acquisitions, and
objective
foreign military
is
sales.
simple if monumental.
Our objective is
Transform
simple
the
if
entire
monumental.
acquisition system to rapidly
Transform the
accelerate
entire
fielding of
acquisition system to
capabilities
rapidly
and focus
accelerate the fielding
on
of capabilities and focus on
the bottom line
results.
is a historic, generational,
The bottom line
and
is a
transformational
historic,
changes
generational, and
transformational
changes that we will implement and will move us from the current prime contractor-dominated system,
vendor lock,
defined by limited
contract,
competition,
stress
vendor
budgets,
lock, cost plus
frustrating
contract,
protests.
stress budgets, and
to a
frustrating
future powered
protests.
by dynamic vendor space that
To a future
accelerates
powered by
production
dynamic
combining
vendor
investment
space that
at a
accelerates
commercial
production
pace
by combining investment
uniquely
at a
American
commercial
ability
pace
to scale and
with the
scale
uniquely
quickly.
American
All
ability to
at
scale
the
and
speed
scale
of
quickly.
urgency.
All at the speed
That
of
speech
urgency.
stands on its own.
That speech
So I'll spend the balance of my
stands on
time
its
here
own.
talking about the other
So I'll
three
spend the
lines
balance of my
effort,
time
the
here
first of which
talking
are
about the
defending the
other
US
three lines of
homeland
effort, the
and
first of which are defending the U.S.
The Biden
homeland
administration was
and
more
hemisphere.
concerned about Ukraine's borders
The
than
Biden
our
administration was more concerned about
own. They tried to
Ukraine's
make it
borders than our
controversial
own.
to say that border
They
security
tried to
is
make it
national
controversial
security.
to say that
But
border
that is, of
security
course,
is national
absurd.
security.
Border
But that
security
is, of course,
is
absurd.
national security, and we
Border
are
security
prioritizing
is
accordingly.
national security, and we are prioritizing
Since January
accordingly.
20th, at the direction of President Trump, the
Since
Department
January
of War
20th,
has made
at the
it a
direction
top
of President
priority
Trump,
to
the
defend
Department
our
of War
nation's
has made it a
borders,
top
to get
priority to
100%
defend our nation's
operational
borders,
control of
to get
that.
100%
We did so
operational
by surging
control of
forces,
that border.
where our troops
We did so by
partner
surging
with
forces,
DHS and CBP
where our
to
troops
seal
partner
the
with
border.
DHS and CBP to seal
Under Joe Biden,
the border.
tens of millions of illegals.
Under Joe Biden,
and
tens
we have
of millions
no
of
idea
illegals.
where the hell they
And we
came
have
from,
no
where the hell
idea
they are.
where the hell they came
Flowed
from,
across our border.
where the hell they are.
Not to mention
Flowed
lethal
across our
narcotics
border.
responsible for the death of
Not to mention
hundreds
lethal
of
narcotics
thousands of
responsible for the death of hundreds
Today,
of
the
thousands.
number of illegals crossing into our country
Today,
is
the number of illegals
zero.
crossing into our country is
We are saving
zero.
lives and communities, and we are keeping.
We are saving
that.
lives and communities, and we are.
We're also
keeping
proud to
that
support
way.
our law enforcement partners as they conduct
We're also proud to
mass
support our law
deportations
enforcement partners as they
of
conduct
dangerous
mass
illegals who have
deportations
no business
of
being
dangerous
in our
illegals who
country.
have no business being
We'll secure
in
the
our
border in
country.
part by organizing, training, and
We'll secure the
equipping
border in
units
part by
specifically for
organizing,
border
training,
defense
and
missions,
equipping units
including
specifically for
operations in
border
the land,
defense missions,
maritime, and
including
air domains,
operations in the land,
alongside our
maritime, and
interagency
air
partners.
domains,
We're also leaning on our Mexican
alongside our
counterparts to
interagency
do
partners.
more.
We're also
They have
leaning
made
on our
progress,
Mexican counterparts to do
and
more.
we'll need to see
They
more
have made
quickly.
progress, and we'll need to see
And
more.
so far in this
quickly.
administration, nobody has built
And so
more
far
new
in this
border
administration,
wall
nobody has
than
built
the
more
Department
new
of
border wall than the Department
But our
of
borders
War.
shouldn't be the first line of defense for the American
But our
homeland.
borders
They should
shouldn't be the
last
first line of defense for the American homeland. They should be
And
the
that's why
last
we're
line of
prioritizing our
defense.
fight against cartels.
And that's why
throughout
we're
the Western
prioritizing our
Hemisphere.
fight against cartels throughout the
You
Western
can just
Hemisphere.
look at the news.
You can just
Not all.
look at the news. Not all of the
The
news.
days in which these narco-terrorists,
The days in which
designated
these
terror
narco
organizations operate freely in our
designated
hemisphere
terror
are over.
organizations operate freely in our
These
hemisphere are
narco-terrorists
over.
are the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere.
These narco-terrorists
and we're
are the
hunting them with the same
Al-Qaeda of our
sophistication
hemisphere, and we are
precision
hunting them with the
that we
same
hunted
sophistication
Al-Qaeda.
and precision
We are
that we
tracking
hunted
them,
Al-Qaeda.
we are killing them.
We are
And we'll
tracking
keep
them,
killing them so
we are
long as they
killing
are
them.
poisoning our people
And we'll
with
keep killing them
narcotics
so long as they are
lethal
poisoning our people
that
with
they're tantamount
narcotics
to chemical
so
weapons.
lethal that they're tantamount to
We're
chemical
not doing
weapons.
this on our own. Throughout our hemisphere, our
We're not doing
allies
this
and
on our
partners
own.
recognize that these
Throughout our hemisphere, our
narco-terrorists
allies and
threaten them
partners
as well.
recognize that these
So we're
narco-terrorists
working
threaten
together,
them as
sometimes
well.
overtly, sometimes
So
not.
we're working together, sometimes
And we'll keep
overtly,
doing so for the
sometimes
sake
not.
of a safer,
And
secure,
we'll keep doing
and
so
more
for the
stable
sake of a
hemisphere
safer,
for all of
secure,
us.
and more stable hemisphere.
But make no mistake,
for
where
all
a
of us.
country cannot or will
But make
not
no
do
mistake,
its
where a
part,
country
then we at the
cannot or
Department of
will
War
not
always
do
be ready
its
to take
part, then we at the
decisive
Department of
action.
War will always be ready to take
in this hemisphere,
decisive
in
action.
our hemisphere,
In this hemisphere,
there is
in
no safe
our
haven for
hemisphere,
narco-terrorists.
there is no safe haven. for
Securing the border does
narco-terrorists.
not mean we're losing sight of other critical homeland
Securing the border
defense
does not mean
missions.
we're losing
On the
sight of other
contrary, we're
critical
doubling
homeland
down.
defense missions.
One of the
On
first
the contrary, we're
executive orders
doubling
signed by
down.
President Trump was for
One
the
of the first
creation
executive
of
orders
Golden
signed by
Dome
President
for
Trump
America.
was for the creation
A
of the
revolutionary
Golden Dome
approach to
for
defend
America.
our nation from
A
advanced
revolutionary
aerial
approach to
threats.
defend our nation
And
from
we're
advanced
accelerating
aerial
efforts on
threats.
that right now.
And we're accelerating efforts
And Golden
on
Dome will
that
produce
right now.
tangible protection for this country.
And Golden Dome will
inside
produce
the timeframe
tangible
of this
protection for this
administration
country
and
inside the
beyond.
time
President
frame of this
Reagan
administration
promised
and
SDI,
beyond.
Strategic
President
Defense
Reagan
Initiative.
promised SDI,
President Trump's
Strategic
doing the same
Defense
thing.
Initiative.
Now the tech is caught
President
up.
Trump's doing the
We
same
can actually
thing.
build the Golden
Now the
Dome
tech is caught
for
up,
America.
and we can
A
actually
game
build the Golden Dome for America.
At the same time,
A
we're
game
also
changer.
rapidly strengthening our nation's ability.
At the same time, we're also
deter and
rapidly
defend
strengthening our
against
nation's
cyber
ability
attacks
to
on Department of
deter
War
and defend
dual-use
against
targets,
cyber attacks on Department of War
including through the
and
most
dual-use
comprehensive
targets.
overhaul of U.S.
Including including through the most comprehensive overhaul of U.S. cyber command
Nor have we
started
lost sight of the
15 years
threat
ago.
of global jihad.
Nor have we lost sight of the threat of global
as with
jihadism.
narco-terrorists working alongside our partners in the IC,
As with narco-terrorists working alongside our partners in the IC and other agencies, as well as partners abroad, we will continue to hunt and kill Islamist terrorists with the intent and ability to strike our homeland.
All of this, of course, rests upon the power of our nations.
All of this, of course, rests upon the power of our nations,
which is foundation,
nuclear
foundation of our nation's
which is the foundation of our nation's
if we don't get this
defense.
right, and so we will.
Nothing else matters if we don't get this right, and so
we will modernize our nation's
As President Trump has said, we will modernize our nation's nuclear triad. We will develop additional options to support deterrence and escalation management, and we will never allow this nation to be left vulnerable to nuclear blackmail, even in a world where we face two other major nuclear-armed powers. And we will test nuclear weapons and nuclear delivery systems on an equal basis.
Finally, the department's activities throughout the Western Hemisphere aren't just about killing narco-terrorists. They're also about deterring and defending our nation's interests against other threats. To that end, the President will always provide. To that end, the President will always provide. The Department will always provide the President with credible options guaranteeing U.S. military and commercial. That includes guaranteeing U.S. military and commercial access to key terrain. The Caribbean, the Gulf of America,
like the Panama Canal,
Arctic,
the Caribbean, the Gulf of America,
in all instances, we stand ready to work in good faith.
In all instances, we stand ready to work in good faith with our neighbors. But they must do their part to defend shared interests.
The War Department stands ready to take focused and to fight decisive action.
The War Department stands ready to take focused and to fight decisive action that advances U.S.
This is the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine.
Is the Trump corollary
recently codified
to the Monroe Doctrine.
In the national security
recently codified so clearly in the national security strategy.
The United States will restore U.S.
After years of neglect, the United States will restore U.S. military dominance in the Western Hemisphere.
Homeland.
We will use it to protect our homeland
throughout the region.
And access to
key
terrain throughout the region. We will also deny adversaries' ability to position forces or other threatening capabilities in our hemisphere. Past administrations perpetuated the belief that the Monroe Doctrine had expired.
The Monroe Doctrine
they were wrong.
Is in effect.
The Monroe Doctrine is in effect
under the Trump corollary.
And it is stronger than ever under the Trump corollary.
Of our power and
a common sense restoration of our power and prerogatives in this hemisphere, consistent with U.S. interests.
The second line of effort for the War Department is deterrence.
The second line of effort for the War Department is deterrence against China
through confrontation.
Through strength.
Under President Trump's leadership, relations between the United States
Under President Trump's leadership, relations between the United States and China are better and stronger than they've been in this administration.
Seek a stable
President Trump and this administration seek a stable peace, fair trade, and respectful relations.
In November, President Trump and President Xi reached a major breakthrough in trade, putting both nations on a strong economic pathway. Reciprocal state visits in 2026 provide the opportunity for even more. The War Department is committed to the same approach. The War Department is committed to the same approach, opening a wider range of military-to-military communications aimed at deconfliction and de-escalation. Aimed at deconfliction and de-escalation. We laid the groundwork for this with our counterparts months ago at ASEAN in Malaysia, and will continue. This line of effort is based on flexible realism.
This line of effort is based on flexible realism,
an approach aimed not at domination, but rather at a balance of power.
Aimed not at domination, but rather at a balance of power.
Enable all of us, all countries.
A balance of power that will enable all of us, all countries, to enjoy a decent peace in the Indo-Pacific where trade flows openly and fairly. Where we can all prosper and all interests are
the world that we seek in the Indo-Pacific.
That's the world that we seek in the Indo-Pacific. And that is what our approach is designed to produce.
But not
we will be strong,
confrontational.
But not
to quote another great Republican president, we will speak softly.
To quote another great Republican president, we will speak softly.
As I said at Shangri-La earlier this year, we're not trying to strangle
China's growth. We're not trying to dominate or humiliate them. Nor are we trying to change the status quo over Taiwan.
Our interests in the Indo-Pacific are significant.
Our interests in the Indo-Pacific are significant.
And reasonable.
But also scoped.
This includes the ability for us, along with allies,
this includes the ability for us, along with allies, to be postured strongly enough in the Indo-Pacific to balance China's growing power. This means ensuring none of our allies are vulnerable to sustained, successful military aggression. This is what we mean by deterrence in the Indo-Pacific.
But rather ensuring
not dominating China, but rather ensuring they do not have the ability to dominate us or our allies.
In this vein, our role at the Department of War is essential.
In this vein, our role at the Department of War is essential.
It's our job to make sure Beijing sees unquestionable U.S. military strength
can back up our
that, if necessary, can back up our national interests.
Our peaceful intentions,
even as we make clear our peaceful intentions, we insist that as a Pacific nation ourselves, China respect our long-standing interests in the Indo-Pacific,
but maintain the manifest strength to underwrite.
But maintain the manifest strength
This
to underwrite.
involves respecting the historic military
This involves
buildup
respecting the historic military
Our
buildup they
department
are
maintains
undertaking.
a clear-eyed
Our department maintains a
of how
clear-eyed
rapid, formidable,
appreciation
and holistic the military
of how
buildup
rapid,
has
formidable, and holistic the
been. We take
military
these
buildup
capabilities
has
seriously.
been. We take
It would be
these
silly and
capabilities
frankly
seriously.
disrespectful not to.
It would be silly and frankly
This approach
disrespectful
requires
not to.
focus,
This approach
prioritization,
requires
and clarity
focus,
of purpose.
prioritization,
That's
and
why we will
clarity of
ensure our
purpose.
military can, if God
That's
forbid
why we will ensure our
necessary,
military can,
project
if God
sustained
forbid
capabilities along the
necessary,
First Island chain
project
throughout the
sustained
Indo-Pacific.
capabilities along the First
That
Island
means
chain
being
throughout
so
the
strong that
Indo-Pacific.
aggression is not even considered.
That means being so strong
And
that
that
aggression
peace
is not
is
even
preferred.
considered,
and preserved.
and that peace is preferred
This
and
is
preserved.
deterrence by denial.
This
It
is
is our job
deterrence
to
by
ensure
denial.
that President Trump is always
It is
able
our
to
job to
negotiate
ensure
from
that
a
President
position
Trump
of
is
strength
always able to negotiate
order
from
to
a
sustain
position of
peace
strength
in the
in
Indo-Pacific.
order to sustain peace.
This is not
in
a
the
pivot for
Indo-Pacific.
tomorrow. It is a
This is not a
reality
pivot for tomorrow.
today.
It is a reality.
And finally,
for
our
today.
third line of effort is increasing burden
And finally,
sharing
our
with US
third line
allies
of
around
effort
the
is
world.
increasing burden sharing with
Here
U.S.
again, many
allies around the world.
self-ascribed neo-Reaganites
Here again, many
seem to have
self-ascribed
lost the plot.
neo-Reaganites seem to have
According
lost
to them,
the plot.
only the United States.
According to
has
them,
the
only
ability to provide for
the
defense
United
and deterrence
States
in Europe,
has the ability to
the Middle East,
provide
and
for
the
defense
Indo-Pacific.
and deterrence in
According
Europe,
to them,
the
if the
Middle East, and
United
the
States
Indo-Pacific.
doesn't do it, nobody will.
According to them, if the United
In
States
fact,
doesn't
according
do
to
it, nobody
some,
will.
America is actually
according
better
to some,
off subsidizing these
America
allies'
is actually
defenses,
better
even
off
if they're
subsidizing these
perfectly
allies'
capable of
defenses,
doing
even
more
if
for
they're
themselves
perfectly
and our
capable of
collective
doing
defense.
more for themselves than our collective
It's, of course,
defense.
patently ridiculous.
That,
Not to mention
of course, patently
insulting
ridiculous.
to our allies.
Not to mention
It's actually
insulting
vitally
to our
important
allies.
for America's allies and partners to
It's actually
step up and
vitally
do their
important
part
for
our
America's
collective
allies and partners to
defense.
step up and do their part.
This
for our
isn't just a
collective
matter of doing
defense.
right by Americans who are
This isn't just a matter of doing right by
years
Americans
of
who are
allied free
rightfully
riding.
frustrated by
This
years
is
of
pragmatic.
allied free riding.
As we rightly prioritize our
pragmatic.
homeland hemisphere in the
As we rightly
Indo-Pacific, threats
prioritize our
persist in
homeland
other regions.
hemisphere in the Indo-Pacific,
And our
threats
allies need to
persist in
step
other
up.
regions. And our allies need to
Step up for real. Our
And
allies in
step
Europe
up for
face
real.
Russia. Iran has been set back.
Our
by the
allies in
president
Europe
and
face
Israel's
Russia.
actions,
Iran has been
but
set back by the
remains a
president
threat
and Israel's
in the Middle
actions,
East,
but
and of course
remains
North
a
Korea
threat
looms on the
in the Middle
Korean
East.
Peninsula.
And of course, North Korea looms on the Korean
We
Peninsula.
must also prepare for the possibility of
We
simultaneous threats
must also
in different
prepare for the
regions.
possibility of
That
simultaneous
doesn't mean
threats
we
in
think
different
such
regions.
simultaneous action
That doesn't
is
mean
likely
we
or
think such simultaneous
necessarily
action
inevitable.
is likely
But it's
or
something the Department of
necessarily
War
inevitable.
must be prepared
But it's
for.
something the Department of War
And the
must
best way to
be
prepare for
prepared
this
for.
is not by pretending
And
we
the
can
best
do
way to
everything
prepare
or
for
be
this is
everywhere.
not by pretending we can do
Effectively
everything or
handing
be
a
everywhere.
permission slip for our
Effectively
allies'
handing a
laggardly
permission
defense
slip
efforts.
for our allies' laggardly
This
defense
neo-Reaganite
efforts.
attitude led us to fritter away
This
our soldiers'
neo-Reaganite
lives,
attitude led us
our
to
national
fritter
resources,
away our soldiers'
and our
lives,
citizens'
our national
support
resources,
in
and
rudderless
our citizens'
wars.
support in
Our
rudderless
approach is
wars.
fundamentally different, and in keeping with the noble
Our approach is
tradition
fundamentally different,
of
and in
President
keeping with
Reagan
the
as well as
noble
Nixon
tradition
and Eisenhower.
of President
We
Reagan
will
as well as
actually,
Nixon and Eisenhower.
For real,
we
get
will
our allies and
actually,
partners to step up
for
and do their
real,
part.
get our allies and
We will
partners
no
to
longer
step up and do their
tolerate
part.
free riding.
We will no longer
President Trump
tolerate
has
free
shown the
riding.
way with his historic leadership. That
President
yielded
Trump has shown the way with his
commitments at
historic
NATO's
leadership
Hague
that yielded the
Their
commitments
NATO
at
committed
NATO's
to
Hague
spend
Summit.
5%.
Their NATO
of
committed to
GDP
spend
on defense.
5%,
3.5
of GDP on
military,
defense,
and
3.5 on core military, and 1.5 on
and pledged to take
security-related
primary
investments,
responsibility
and pledged
for
to take
Europe's
primary
conventional
responsibility
defense.
for Europe's
Things
conventional
Most
defense.
folks sitting here just 5
Things
years ago would have thought.
Most folks sitting here just
impossible.
5 years ago would have thought completely
We're now
impossible.
using this template to press our allies around the world. To
We're now
meet
using this
new
template
global
to press
standard
our
the president
allies
has
around the
set.
world to meet this new global
It's working.
standard the president has set.
First, there was Europe and Canada.
It's working.
And just last month,
First,
South
there was
Korea
Europe and
committed to
Canada.
spend
And
3.5
just last month, South Korea
on core
committed to spend
military spending
3.5
and assumed the leading
on core
role
military
in the
spending
ROC's
and
conventional
assumed the
defense.
leading role in the ROC's
You're optimistic
conventional defense.
that under other
You're optimistic
Indo-Pacific allies,
that under
will
other
follow suit.
Indo-Pacific allies,
in a few years,
will
thanks
follow
to
suit.
President Trump's visionary
in a few
leadership,
years, thanks to President
we will
Trump's
have our
visionary
allies, which
leadership,
include
we will have our allies, which include some of the wealthiest and most productive countries in the world, once again fielding combat credible militaries and boasting revived defense industrial industries. This will form a powerful shared defensive shield with well-armed allies around the world ready to defend themselves, their interests and our collective interests, and alliances, real partnerships and alliances based on fancy conferences based on theories, not just flags and fancy conferences based on theories. Our allies are not children. Our allies are not children. Doing far more for themselves. They're nations capable of doing far more for themselves than they have. In fact, many of them are nations who have proud and powerful. In fact, many of them are nations who have proud and powerful martial traditions of their own, and we should treat them that way. We can and should and must expect them to do their part exactly as President Trump has. Model allies that step up like Israel, Israel, South Korea, Poland, increasingly Germany, the Baltics, and others will receive our special favor. Allies that still fail to do their part for collective defense. Allies that still fail to do their part for collective defense will face consequences. Makes sense to me. President Trump likes helping countries that help themselves. Likes helping countries that help themselves. That's the nature of partnerships. That's the nature of partnerships. It's what we rather than dependencies. It's what we owe our friends, and most importantly, what we owe the American people. This is a period of great consequence for our great republic. This is a period of great consequence. Our forefathers fought and won the Cold War, ushering a unipolar moment, during which America stood tremendous opportunity. It was a time of tremendous opportunity, well earned after a century marked by 2 world wars and a Cold War. Always under. Well, as you know, that unipolar moment is over. Well, as you know, that unipolar moment is over, and we have an opportunity to define what under President Trump's leadership. That's exactly under President Trump's leadership. That's exactly what we're doing. The Department of War at the President's direction is laser focused on advancing America first, common sense, peace through strength. We're reviving the warrior ethos. We are rebuilding our great military, and every day our warriors are reestablishing the deterrence that Joe Biden so foolishly We owe safety, freedom, and prosperity. We owe safety, freedom, and prosperity to the American people. We will achieve peace through strength, which is what the American people voted for, and what President Trump demands. In doing this, we appeal to Almighty God. And in doing this, we appeal to Almighty God. Just as George Washington, the founder of the War Department, appealed to God's providence during every step of our improbable revolution. On prayer, on bended knee, Ronald Reagan did the same. On the battlefield. Appealing to heaven. Ronald Reagan did the same. As the world hung in the balance. Appealing to heaven as the world hung in the balance. Today. With Jesus Christ, we do the same today. May He grant us the wisdom to see what is right. May He grant us the wisdom to see what is right, to do it, and the courage. May God bless our warriors, and may God bless our warriors, and may God bless our great republic. Thank you.